presenter. His name is Vaughn Davis. He's a Press Association of Jamaica award-winning radio producer and journalist who currently serves the Jamaica Information Service as manager of the agency's radio department. Although his radio broadcasting career spans over 15 years, he developed his news shark skills as a crime beat and courtroom reporter for 3 years at the Jamaica Observer Limited. In his present role, Mr. Davis directs the daily delivery of high-quality, informative, and engaging content to diverse audiences on almost all Jamaican radio stations during time allowed for government broadcasts. News stories and 5-minute radio features are produced to convey topical government of Jamaica's policies and programs, as well as for other agencies, departments, and private sector interests. Mr. Davis is the lead content producer of his Let That Sink In show hosted on YouTube and Instagram. He's also a charismatic event host and master of ceremonies. His professional mission is to develop his creative capacity to present informative and educational products across several platforms. He aims to give the right information at the right time to the right person. He hopes it will inspire and activate his audience's potential to step into their purpose and start living their best lives. Mr. Davis, welcome to this Radio Breakout session. And I hope that as you present, we'll all learn. Please let him feel welcome as he comes to us.
All right, good morning
Some
again,
thumbs
everyone.
up in the chat.
Morning. I'm really happy to be here with you guys sharing in this moment. All right, let us begin. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I hope you're all seeing. The title of my presentation today, ladies and gentlemen, is This is War. Now, be able to skip 1 minute. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the radio industry is at war. We are in a war for the attention of the public, and it's been especially tough for around the last 15 years. Before that time, everything was nice. I mean, the big three traditional media, television, radio, print, were running things and life was good, especially for radio. We had our own lane, people tuned in regularly, and there was no worry that we'd get displaced. Then around 2010, the internet made a quantum leap, and digital technology became supercharged and strengthened our competition in ways we couldn't imagine. This sparked the rise of on-demand platforms. People could access news and entertainment whenever they felt like it and no longer had to be by a radio to do so. They had devices literally in the palms of their hands. Feel like if I asked any of you when was the last time you deliberately listened to the radio, a lot of you would probably start moving around uncomfortably in your chairs and look anywhere but at me directly. But it's okay. I'm not judging you a whole lot. Anyway, no. And then when podcasting went viral, many started to wonder if radio was truly on its way out. I mean, thanks to podcasting equipment, there are persons who continuously share all different kinds of opinions and thoughts and ideas, whether they're no matter how uninformed, unwelcome, or just generally unwanted. But They're everywhere and we have to deal with them. These are our main enemies at the moment in this war. The laptop. Now, the laptop has access to all different kinds of platforms at your fingertips. You can, all types of different platforms for you to access all different kinds of content readily, easily, quickly, with little delay. The next enemy is the television, smart televisions. They have integrated all kinds of on-demand platforms on them. So once you get home, you go straight to the TV, turn it on, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, you name it, they're all there, in addition to the cable. So you have those distractions pulling your focus away from the radio. And then, of course, the nuclear weapon threat launched at the radio industry, the smartphone. This smartphone has everything on it, and it's designed primarily to make sure you focus mostly on social media and all other platforms and ignore platforms that don't have the audio visual. It focuses on audio visual components, plus it has interactive elements. You can like, share, subscribe, comment, all kinds of things. And they can outdo a lot of what radio can do. And we've had to contend with that because this is just the way we are. This is where the world is at this present moment. But fast forward a few years, and thankfully, radio hasn't gone down without a fight. We have a space that we've been fighting and trying to hold on to and keep our enemies from taking us out. We are here when the internet is gone. We keep your company when you work. We keep your company and give you vibes while you're working and while you're working out. And we offer diversity and local content when you're tired of listening to the same types of online content over and over and over again. But this space can slip from our grasp at any moment. And it's up to the coming generation to keep fighting to keep radio relevant. So that 20 years from now, we can say radio coming like a bleach stain by your favorite clothes. Can't get way out. Now, the mission is to train a cadre of creative, innovative radio journalists and producers who can help claw back market share for the radio platform. It's going to be difficult, but it is very doable if you follow my instructions. For today's purposes, I am your drill instructor. That's why I'm dressed in this military garb, this military shirt on, aviator sunglasses, and this beret-ish hat. This is a fight. I'm a drill instructor, and welcome to basic training. Okay, are you ready? I hope so. Now, the first thing whenever new radio journalists and producers come to me, I give them an exercise. And I'm going to give you that exercise just to start with. Now, it's simply this. An incident has happened and we need a story for our main radio newscast. We know that it will lead the news, i.e. that will be the first story that airs on the newscast, and it will be the one with the most impact. Information is just coming in, but thankfully, there is a video of what happened. We'll watch it together and determine how we write the story. All right, please pay attention. Now, it's a music video, but don't focus on the music video elements. Focus on the storyline. Pay attention to that. We'll come back in a minute. All right, here we go.
Mr. Davis, we're not hearing any sound.
You're not hearing the sound?
No.
Okay, I think I don't know if I was allowed to share with sound, but for the purposes of the exercise, you may not necessarily need to hear the sound. So we can continue for the time being. Okay, are you hearing me again, everyone?
Yes, we're here.
Yes, we're here.
Good. All right, great. So exercise for me is having watched what just happened on that video. Your job is to write me a lead that will lead being the first two lines of the story that will lead the newscast. And I'm going to give you about a minute to digest what you just saw. And then I'm just going to randomly call someone to just share the lead that you think will lead the newscast on the radio program for the evening. So give yourselves one more minute to just think about it and turn it over. And I'll be right back with you. Think about the elements you just saw of the storyline. What happened, all the elements of what happened, and how you can transform that into content, a news story as a journalist that will help persons to pay attention and understand what just happened. We have about 30 seconds left. All right, quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to pick a random name I saw. Okay, Brittany Dwyer. Brittany, tell me what lead you would write for the story. Is Brittany there, or should I call someone else? Are you all hearing me?
It's here.
All right, if I can't get Brittany, how about Tony Ann? How about you, Tony Ann? Share me what lead you'd write. All right, what lead you'd use to start that story.
Well, based on the elements, I know I saw someone got shot and killed. The other thing I saw was a book being found at the end. So, to be honest, I wrote something like man shot and killed. Eyewitness report, mysterious book was the source of the. Well, was that this? Man shot and killed. Eyewitness report that the mysterious book was the cause of the chaos. I don't know, something like that.
Okay, interesting. All right. How about Kamika Francis? Kamika, can you share what you wrote, or is that a good way to lead that?
I don't think Kamika is here.
Okay. I don't want to mispronounce your name, but Kibish, how do you think you lead that story?
To be honest, I didn't come up with anything.
Okay. All right, I'm not gonna dwell on it for a long time, but essentially in that video, what happened is that man was in a house with a lady, door was kicked off, several men entered the premises and took him away with the intention, at first it appears, to kill him. While they took him into the middle of the wilderness, and while they were there, as they dug the hole to put him in, they discovered a Bible, And then that changed the tenor of the whole situation. And the man, the man in charge decided, all right, based on what just happened, is clearly a spiritual occurrence. So we're just going to let go of the man that them kidnapped and give him a second chance. And that's what happened throughout the course of that video. And so this brings me to strategy number 1 when it comes to radio production. Strategy number 1, get everybody's attention. Now, the most important, whenever new producers or new journalists come to me, the first thing I tell them is that radio is in a situation where people listen to us in the background. And your job as a journalist and a producer, you have to imagine that when your program goes out, it's going out to a person who has just worked an 8-hour shift, coming home on a rainy evening in a packed up coaster, desperately ready and just waiting to go. Your goal is to write content and produce content that when that person hears it, they'll momentarily come out of how they feel in that moment, hold up their head, look around and say, oh, whatever they just say. Your goal is to turn that person's head and make sure that they are paying attention to your work, because there are so many other distractions at play around them, in and around them, so that you have to make sure that they pay attention to what you're doing. In that exercise, my lead would be, a man is thanking his lucky stars today after narrowly escaping an abduction and murder attempt from 5 men on Tuesday. Marlon James, who's a name I just made up. Marlon James says he was in a compromising situation with a female friend while at her home when her front door was suddenly and violently kicked open and 6 men forced their way in. The idea is, when you hear that, that should hopefully, if you were reading, if you were on your phone, if you were just looking aimlessly out the window as you went home, you would suddenly turn around and all the elements that you heard in that opening line a while ago, so like the trailer for some action movie or something like that, and in hopes you will turn around and hopefully pay attention to the rest of the newscast based on what you just heard. So the idea is to write with impact, emotion, style, and energy. Keep these words in mind as you put pen to paper and come up with your scripts, come up with all the work that you have to do, because this is what is going to make sure that people pay attention to the work that you're producing. I always tell my producers that is one of the greatest insults, I think, for you to put all this work in, write so much work, spend so much time and effort to craft your content, and then it starts playing on the radio, person kiss them teeth and change the station. So you have to make sure that when you write, you put pen to paper and you are doing your work, it comes across so impactful, so emotional, so interesting and stylistic and full of energy that it makes them pay attention to what you're doing, hold up them head and pay attention to the rest of your newscast. The next tip is, even as you get their attention, you are not supposed to editorialize. One of the tenets of journalism is objectivity. You're supposed to report the news, but not give your opinion. You're not supposed to make the news. The example I will use is, for example, if you're writing a story about the Prime Minister at some event and he's making a grand announcement, you're there to just report what happened, not add your opinion about what happened. So you would write something along the lines of, the Prime Minister announced that all taxes are abolished in Jamaica from now until the end of time. Whereas a person who is trying to inject their opinion into the story would say, the Prime Minister misguidedly announced. Is giving their opinion about what the Prime Minister is doing, as opposed to simply telling members of the public what the Prime Minister is doing. It's not your job to editorialize. It's not your job to give your opinion. You are, for all intents and purposes, a historian. You are there to just colorfully and creatively tell people what happened. Not interpret it, not share it, not tell people how they're supposed to think or feel about it. You're just there to report the news. Another example I will give you is, to several boos and hisses of the orange-clad crowd, the Prime Minister saluted the green flag on the stage. That tells you clearly and plainly, very creatively and colorfully what happened. But if you were to write something along the lines of, clearly demonstrating an indifference to the opposition, the Prime Minister ignored a hail of boos and hisses and saluted the green flag. What you're doing, clearly demonstrating an indifference to the opposition, is putting words in his mouth, in his mind. You know, I didn't realize if you are able to write like that, then I need to send it on to St. Thomas or wherever else, because clearly you have a very good future as a fortune teller or a reader man or something, because you're able to simply stay from where you are, go into the Prime Minister's mind and tell us what he's thinking and what he's doing. That's not your job as a radio journalist. Well, as a journalist or a producer, you're there to report the news and tell people what happened, but you have to do so with energy, style, impact, and so on, as I mentioned before. All right. And that leads me to strategy number 2. Be clear. Be very clear in your communication to the public. Now, one of the things many persons who are introduced to journalism when they're young, I know this applied to me, is that I thought a journalist was a person who was able to put a whole heap of big words together and say them so them sound intelligent. And that, you know, that was the impression. A person who has a big wide vocabulary and is able to just say a whole heap of words and sound intelligent. That, we could just put that to rest right now. Bury that in some deep trench and throw it away because it is not useful. Your goal as a journalist or as a producer, a radio producer especially, is to communicate effectively. That's where it starts, that's where it stops. You're supposed to speak in the language that your audience understands. The minute you start going and start writing a bag of big words and so on, you've alienated almost half of your audience, if not all of it, because you're forcing them to mentally find out the definition of each word that you're using so that they can follow along and pay attention to what you're doing. An example I'll give you is this one. So listen to this sentence. I proceeded to the marketplace decidedly intending to procure delectable chicken fetuses. Now, compare that to, I went to the store to buy eggs. Now, as you can tell, I mean, and truth be told, I get this all the time. I call it just left college-itis. I encounter a lot of students who come into the department and they're very, very adamant that I must know just exactly how bright they are. I must know just exactly how many hours of study they spent to get their degree, and I must know I must hear all the big words that they learn when they, just let me know. Say, yes, Mr. Davis, I hired the right person. It's with great happiness and a big smile on my face, I bring them in and I show them why I highlight the entire thing and just press the word delete. And tell them to rewrite it, because the fact of the matter is your audience will understand it, so don't waste your time. You know what I mean? It's a hard lesson, but they have to learn it, because the fact of the matter is it's always about effective communication, especially with radio, when all we have is your voice. The persons are hearing you, they need to be able to understand you. And there are persons who didn't go to school, or stopped going to school a long time ago, or, for whatever reasons, they're not nearly as educated as you are. And you still have to communicate with them because it's important to them. That's the connection that they will have with your program. That's what will determine if they listen to you again in the future. So your goal is to communicate effectively and make sure that they understand what you're saying. And that leads me to my next point, which is you only get one shot. Just like Eminem said in his 8 Mile movie, you only get one shot to blow. So when you are reading and reading a script on the air, are you hearing me, everyone? Just want to make sure.
Yes, hearing.
All right. So you only get one shot. When you're speaking on the radio, let me say it this way. While a person's reading a newspaper, they can stop and reread the paragraph 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times to make sure that they understand what's going on. When they're watching TV, there are visual aids on the screen that will help them to follow along and make instant connections with what is happening, what's being said by the presenter, or so on. When it comes to radio, however, there's just your voice. That's it. That's all they have. And a listener can pause and play back what you said to try and understand it. So your goal is to make sure that what you say in the moment is easily and readily understood by a listener. They have to just get it, digest it, and be able to move on and follow along with you from the start to the end of the program. That's your goal, that's your objective. And so it's very important that you are very clear with your with your speaking and your language choice. Make sure that your communication is effective so that when the person is listening to you, they don't have to stop and wonder, what you mean? What you that talk about? I don't understand what you say. I said, but I don't understand that bit. And then they'll tune out and move on to something else. And then you would have lost out on an opportunity to communicate effectively with your audience. All right. Next tip when it comes to the strategy of being clear is to avoid ambiguity. You have to write in ways that do not allow your sentence to be interpreted a whole heap of different kinds of ways. Now, for example, take this sentence. The Prime Minister was addressing a group of needy children at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel. Seems straightforward enough, but to a person like me who listens and has to listen in a multiplicity of ways, it could mean that the Prime Minister was talking to some children, some needy children who live at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel, and he was talking to them down at South Camp Road or somewhere else. It don't matter. I get lines like this all the time, or I hear them all the time on the radio. Lines, sentences, phrases, paragraphs that could be interpreted in a number of ways. And your goal is to make sure that the audience understands what you're saying right then, right there, and they're following along with you. So if they're interpreting a sentence multiple ways, then that is not effective communication, and that is your objective. So I would switch that sentence around to say the Prime Minister was addressing a group of needy children during an event hosted at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel. Make it very clear and very straightforward. It almost seems like you're walking the listener hand in hand through what you want them to understand so that they get to the destination that you want. You don't want them to hear something and gone somewhere way far from where you expected them to understand it. And that's your goal. You have to be clear. I'll stress that more over and over again. Be clear in your language choice, in your delivery, in what you say, because it's very important that persons understand you right when you're talking so that they can follow along and hear what you're saying. Strategy number 3, hone your voice. Needless to say, when you're a radio producer, journalist, anything like that, your voice is your biggest asset. Your voice, that's the thing that impacts people. That's the thing that they connect with. That's the thing that they will be able to truly make a connection with you when you use it. Now, first of all, let me get back to this again. When I get people in here, one of the first things they want to do is sound intelligent. They want to just left UAITs rises up again when I bring them in the studio. First thing they want to do is sound very intelligent. They'll start giving me the Prime Minister delivery or the GG delivery, something like that. That sounds very, very stiff, very, very mechanical, very, very almost like an AI version of themselves. And that can't work. You have to speak conversationally. Now think about it. When you're telling a story, you are naturally expressive and full of emotion. When you're telling somebody, say, yeah, man, the two of you them start fight and one pull out a big knife and swing it off of the next one and him dodge it like Neo in the Matrix. And then him come back and thump him. That's the idea. The same is true for radio production. Your words and voice must blend together to weave a story that captures the imagination as much as it conveys information. When people are listening to you, they want to feel like that you're talking to them, not talking at them. And that's the difference I have to make between persons once they come in here and I start training them to be able to get on the microphone and be able to speak to an audience. The ultimate goal is to speak to the audience as though you're just speaking casually to a friend in the street, because that's how they will be able to build the connection. You're speaking to them. They'll be able to listen. They won't be listening to how your voice sounds. They'll be listening to what you're saying. And that's the goal. That's the goal we have whenever we get anybody inside here, to train them up and make sure that they're able to speak to an audience conversationally. Another element of that same goal of getting you to speak conversationally is you have to be comfortable with being extremely, extremely dramatic. My formula for whenever I'm trying to get persons to start sounding a lot more conversational is to tell them to find their natural tone, then multiply it by 100 or even 1,000. Thing of it is that whenever you're communicating with persons in person, there's a lot of non-verbal cues that are happening. Your faces, you're making faces, your muscles in your face are moving, your hands are moving, your body is moving, all of that. And persons are using that to determine just how they should engage with you and, feel out what you're saying to see how serious you are, how joking you are, all of those different elements. And when you do that, it makes communication so much easier. When it comes to radio production, however, all people have is your voice. That's it. That's all they're hearing. And your voice has to be able to convey all those nonverbal cues so that you sound as they can, even though they can't see you, they can hear all those nonverbal cues that are happening and be able to follow along. They become more engaged in what is happening. So with that said, you have to be far, far more dramatic when your delivery is, when you're making your delivery in the radio production, over the radio, over the airwaves, so that persons can really follow along with you and understand and feel more connected to what you're saying. One of the things about theater acting is that they tell you that you have to speak as though you're talking to the back row, the person way on the back of the theater, to make sure that they hear you as clearly as the person at the front of the theater. And they have to be able to hear all the emotion, all the energy, all the so on that you're delivering. And that's what it comes down to when you're doing radio production. You have to be dramatic. Like, don't just, for example, I went up the hill to fetch some water. It's more like, I went up the hill to fetch some water. The idea being to convey all the emotion available in your voice so persons can follow along, feel connected, and engage with you as you deliver your program. The next thing I always tell persons when I'm telling them to hone their voice is that you have to speak from your throat. Think of it like shouting, really. Whenever you're shouting and when you want to sound authoritative and confident, your voice comes from your throat, not your mouth. And when you speak with your mouth, your voice is low. It's like when you're talking to somebody just in front of you. You're saying just loud enough so that the person can hear you and understand what you're saying, but you're not really conveying a lot of the emotion that you really want. When you want to start stepping it up and sound confident and authoritative, it comes from your throat. However, you don't want to stand up and shout in front of people because, obviously that's not going to work either. So you have to practice to speak from the throat, and then over time, lower your tone and add modulation. That means going up and down. Start talking in a way that you can be, back to previous point, being dramatic. Persons will be able to understand what you're saying, but they'll feel the emotion, but you're speaking very confident as if you're right in front of them. And so that's the idea that we're going for. We want you to speak from your throat so you sound authoritative and confident, but at the same time still able to convey emotion so that persons can follow along and feel engaged and confident, right? Lastly, to be dynamic. I want persons to practice reading with high energy, low energy, slow, fast, happy, sad. Challenge yourself to convey an emotion with only your voice, and ask your friends and others around you if you're successful. That's one of the best tips I can give anybody who's interested in joining radio production. That way you can have, your voice becomes much more of an instrument, and you'll be able to do voiceover work for commercials and long documentaries, things of that nature, because your voice will be flexible. A lot of persons just find a particular sound and they just stay there. They don't try and grow it, be more dynamic, and learn how to use their voice in a multiplicity of ways. And so it kind of becomes one-dimensional and monotonous. Even though you have a nice sounding voice, they can't really do a whole heap with it. You, if you want to be one of the more successful and more impactful radio producers or journalists, you really have to hone your voice. Practice really reading in ways that you never even thought you could. Read when you're sad. Read when you're happy. Read with a whole heap of high energy. Read like you're depressed. Challenge your voice to really push its limits so that you can have a different array of skills to use your voice to earn from it. Because that's how you develop staying power in this industry. You have to separate yourself from others. And by doing so with your voice is one of the best ways you can do that. All right? Now, this is my final strategy. Number 4, be the weapon. Now, I like superheroes. I don't know if many of you, but I love superheroes. All right. I love comics and all of that. One of my favorite superheroes is one called Green. And a couple of years ago, there was a TV series with him called Arrow, aired for quite some time. And I particularly love, one of the things I love about Arrow and the character Green Arrow is that okay, well, his thing, you know, as a superhero is that he uses a bow and arrow. The character is probably based on like Robin Hood or William Tell. Those characters from the past, you know, famously use bow and arrows and so on and so forth. And obviously the question came up in the show, why, of all the weapons you could choose to go out there and fight crime and be an impactful superhero, you could have choose a gun, you could have choose lasers, you could have choose any number of things to, you know, to be an impactful superhero. He chose a bow and arrow, which seemed kind of limited when you think about it, you know. The arrows, now when them finish, where I go do? The criminal have a gun, may have, you know, an extended clip and have 100 bullets, you know, how you go fighting with a bow and arrow, we have like 10 or so arrows. He gave an interesting answer in the episode that has stuck with me to this day. The answer he said was that his arrow is not the weapon. He is the weapon. And what he meant by that when he said it is that he has studied and analyzed the craft of being a superhero to the degree that there is no scenario he could enter where he couldn't likely see a successful outcome. He knows himself, he knows the psychology of criminals, he knows the psychology of how the world operates and how criminals operate and how he needs to be in order to successfully navigate any scenario involving crime or criminals, anything like that. So basically, he's saying that the bow and arrow is brighter. He could go into a room full of 10 gunmen with a paperclip and still come out successful. Why? Because he is the weapon and not the arrow that he carries around with him. And that's the same thing I want to, in a roundabout way, convey to you as upcoming radio producers. You are the weapon. The radio is not the platform. You are the platform. It is you who is going to make an impact on the radio platform going forward by virtue of what you bring to the platform. So with that said, you have to hone your personality. As you can see in this day and age, in the age of influencers and persons of interest and so on, it's the personalities that stand out. It's the persons who are able to generate and curate and amass a big following and get persons to follow them because of their particular perspective and the way they view the world and what they bring, their energy. That said, that don't mean say everybody must be Miss Kitty. That everybody needs to say la 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 la, run around, you know, be very loud and vivacious and so on. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are many persons for whom that is not their natural disposition. You could be like Diane Jackson Miller, who has her own style. You could be like Emily Crooks, who has her own style. You could be like Bergerman, who has his own style. The idea is to hone your personality, find out what your niche is, what you like, how you want to express yourself, and hone that so that when you move, people will move with you. Take, for example, Ron Muschette. He moves from station to station to station. But people follow him because of his personality and who he is. So with that said, you have to hone your personality so that when you move, people move with you. Next tip is to learn constantly. Make a concerted effort to learn everything that's going on in the sector. Learn about new technology. Learn about what it's able to do, what it will allow you to do, what it will allow you to bring to your radio programming, what it will allow you to, if you want to be a journalist style, if you want to go down the more journalistic element of the industry, how can you leverage technology to make you more impactful? How can it help you to develop sources and be able to write more impactful stories and features and that kind of thing? Or if you want to go down the more technical thing to learn how you can host programs, execute them more efficiently, expand your reach, do all those things. Stay abreast of what's going on in the space so that you can pivot where necessary and add something new and add new elements to your program so it will be more impactful and more people will want to pay attention to what you're doing. The next step is to challenge yourself. Don't just do what you know you can do. If you only do what you know you can do, you won't grow. It's just a fact of life. You have to challenge yourself and do things that you're not comfortable with, because over time and through practice, you'll eventually become better at it. And before you know it, you'll have another weapon in your arsenal. You'll be able to go in a different scenario or incorporate new elements to your overall production, whatever your skill set is, and win new audience members, expand your reach, and be much more impactful. You have to challenge yourself. That's just the way it is. If you want to grow, you have to challenge yourself. You don't grow in comfort. And lastly, focus on what radio can do, not what it can't. A lot of us get caught up in the trap of comparing radio to social media and comparing radio to online and podcasting and all of that. When you start doing that, you really start focusing on what radio can't do. And then you just like, boy, if we could have do this, if we could have added in this element, if we could have, visuals and all these things. Don't go down that rabbit hole. Focus on what radio itself can do. Lean into its strengths. You have sound effects, you have all kind of programming effects that you can use to leverage and make your program much more interesting. Plus, there's new technology coming around all the time that will help you to add new elements and make it even more impactful, which is really up to you. But the idea being just focus on what radio can do, not what it can't. That way, you will definitely be able to see things differently and create a new lasting legacy in the radio sector. All right? And if after listening to all of this, you believe that you have what it takes to jump into the sector and make a serious impact, then we want you all to spend the time to think about the ways in which we can transform the radio industry in Jamaica. Ways in which you can add something that has not been done before. Even if it's done before, you can do it better than everybody else. Because that's the only way radio is going to survive. New, dynamic, innovative people who come in and add new elements, find ways to repackage the old information or repackage the old presentation and give it some energy, give it some life so that we can have much more impactful programs, a much more impactful platform overall. And if you think that you have the skills and the ability to do that, then we want you. We want you to come in and take it seriously and do your best so that radio is around, like I said in the start, for another 20, 35 years now, coming like a bleach stain where you can't get out. All right? With that said, thank you. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for listening to me. I hope I didn't go too on. I want to keep it just short enough so that you could get a sense of what's happening, but what you need to do to move forward. All right? Thank you all for your attention. And back over to you, Nicholas. I will stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for that wonderful presentation. And I can see all the different gems coming out of it. I learned so much. I hope others too have learned and have been inspired by what Mr. Davis had just shared with us. Now we are at that moment when we can ask Mr. Davis what we want, or our question and answer segment. So feel free. Anyone wants to start? Any question that you have for Mr. Davis, you can go ahead and ask him.
Don't all shout at once. Don't transform into a monster and frighten people yet. It's Tuesday. Today's Wednesday, so I don't do that on Wednesday.
While persons think about your questions, I have a question, Mr. Davis. You talk about the different, radio at war and the different rise of platforms coming in, posing a challenge for radio to stay relevant. But what would you say is radio's biggest strength despite the rise of different platforms? What would you say is the biggest strength?
I think radio's biggest strength is the sentiment that people still have attached to it. People are still attached to radio. When I was thinking about this question for real, I've realized that when social media and all the different online platforms just came out, and we saw all the things that they could do. You know, it was easy to fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, man, this must replace radio. Them get knocked over, no problem. But the truth of the matter is we just gave it some time, and you realize that each media platform serves a specific purpose or serves its own purpose. It's in its own lane. So one isn't necessarily displacing the other. Each one kind of stays in its own lane. And the thing that radio offers to many people is that it's dynamic. It takes the guesswork out of when you have all these different platforms that you go on Netflix, you go on Amazon Prime, you go on Hulu, all these different places, YouTube. You have to actually sit down and search and decide your mind what you want to watch, what mood you're in today to decide what I want to see, what I want to figure out, all of that. When you go on radio, it's just playing. You're able to sit down and possibly enjoy the experience without necessarily feeling like you have to actively work to curate what you want to watch and what you want to experience. That's one. Number two, a lot of the social media and a lot of online platforms can become echo chambers. In the same way, you basically just showing you the CMO type of content all the time. And basically showing you the same documentaries you like to watch, the same videos you like to watch. And unless your favorite creator posts something new, it's just same old that you're going to end up seeing. So what ends up happening with radio is that it shows you a lot of things, it exposes you to a lot of things you wouldn't necessarily expose yourself to on a day-to-day basis. It allows you to learn more and be exposed to different kinds of content and material that will allow you to grow and develop. And that's a really strong benefit as well. People are also sentimentally attached to the radio. And well, second, before I even go there are many, we forget that the digital divide is a real thing. There are many persons who don't have internet and don't have computer and don't have any of those things. Deep way out in deep way in Jamaica, and that's just, the radio is their biggest source of information and entertainment. And you don't need internet to be able to do it. You can still enjoy the information that's there and still be able to participate and feel like you know what's going on in society. So that's one of big radio's biggest advantages, that you don't need internet. You can just plug it in and you're good to go. You can enjoy and learn all the different things, exposed to all the different, news, entertainment, all different kinds of content that we put through on a radio station as well. So radio has several, plus the personalities and the way people present the product, and you get to know the personalities much more intimately on the radio because you're able to hear them on outside broadcasts and things of that nature. Radio is still very strong in connecting with members of the public. When people go out on the outside broadcast and they hear themselves and they connect, and that big party atmosphere, it works so well. So radio still has a lot of advantages at the moment. It's very sentimental and people are still attached to it. And I don't think radio is going anywhere, in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Mr. Davis. I'm afraid that we are actually out of time. So if you had any questions, I'm afraid that we aren't able to take it at this time. But I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for taking your time out to come and present to us. As I said, I know I have learned a lot, and the different gems that you have shared with us, I have learned from it. You talk about, when writing your lead, be straightforward, capture the audience, and you talk about us being clear when reporting. You talk about us owning our voices and be the weapon, and that, I believe, is very important to be a good radio personality. Once again, thank you all for participating.